It's another episode of Healthy Living on Trust TV. I'm Aisha Salihu. The eye is a sensory organ of sight which has different components that are indeed tender. It collects light from the visible world around us and converts it into nerve impulses. The optic nerve transmits these signals to the brain, which forms an image, so thereby providing sight. But when the optic nerve records a damage that's usually caused by elevated pressure inside the eye, then there is a suspected case of glaucoma, and if left untreated, could lead to blindness. Only an optometrist or ophthalmologist is trained to spot the early warning signs of glaucoma and to begin glaucoma treatment before vision loss occurs.
So glaucoma is an eye disease that affects the optic nerve head. The optic nerve is the nerve that connects the eye to the brain. Basically, it's like where vision is being transmitted from the eye to the brain for interpretation. And it's a gradual damage, causes a gradual damage to the optic nerve and can eventually lead to blindness. One of the most common manageable factors is that there is raised intraocular pressure. Intraocular pressure is simply the eye pressures in layman's terms.
Okay, so glaucoma now, does it come in types?
Yes, there are different types that can be further broken down into numerous different types. But primarily, there are just two: primary glaucoma and secondary glaucoma. Like the name implies, primary means the glaucoma comes on its own. It's not as a result of something else. While secondary is usually as a result of some other underlying factor. It could be another eye disease. It could be another systemic condition that caused it. So primary, secondary. Primary glaucoma is actually the most common one, and there are two types of primary glaucoma: primary open angle glaucoma and primary angle closure glaucoma. And the primary open angle is the most common form of glaucoma, which we usually come in contact with, both clinically and outside the clinic. In fact, it actually accounts for over 90% of the glaucoma we talk about. Most times, when we talk about glaucoma, it's usually primary open angle glaucoma because that's the one that affects everybody the most. That's the one we see clinically and outside the clinic. So, primary open angle glaucoma.
Okay, so what are the causes of glaucoma?
Okay, maybe I wouldn't want to use the word causes. I'd rather use the word predisposing factors or risk factors, because a lot of research over the years has been done on glaucoma, and we can't really say there is a particular cause for glaucoma. However, we decided to take the research to another dimension and found out things that predisposes someone to having glaucoma. So the very first thing is race. We blacks, we are more inclined to having glaucoma than other races. This basically has to do with genetics. It's the way we are born. They've tried to link it to one or two genes, but the results are not usually consistent. But it's just been noticed that if you pair a black and a white population together, more blacks tend to have glaucoma than whites. Then secondly, age. Older people, usually those above the age of 40, are more likely to have glaucoma than younger people. However, it doesn't mean younger people do not have glaucoma. So age is another risk factor. People above the age of 40. But glaucoma cuts across every age. There's even a kind of glaucoma called congenital glaucoma, which means these children are born with glaucoma. So age. Then family history. If there is someone in the family that has glaucoma, it means there's a higher risk for you to have glaucoma. And in your lateral generation, it means your siblings, there's a 4 times more risk. If, for example, if I discover that I have glaucoma, it means there's a 4 times more risk for my brothers and my sisters. Then your vertical generation, which talks about your children, there's a 6 times more risk. So if I discover I have glaucoma, it means there's a 6 times more risk that my children would have glaucoma. So that's why we always advise anyone who has glaucoma should advise or prompt his family members to have an eye check so that we'll discover if they do have glaucoma, and preferably if they don't, and we take steps towards managing it. Then there are certain kinds of drugs that you can take, majorly steroids, that could result in elevated pressure in the eye, and once this pressure is elevated, it can eventually lead to glaucoma. That's why most times we tend to advise people to avoid self-medication, because last time I came to the eye clinic, I had this problem. The doctor saw me and he gave me this drug. Today again, it feels like I am feeling the same symptoms, and you go to the pharmacy, you get that drug and keep using it repeatedly. At the end of the day, it may result in elevated eye pressures and eventually may result in glaucoma. So that's why we always advise against self-medication. Then there are some other few minor diseases that could result in glaucoma as a secondary form. But these are the major causes.
Okay, speaking of diseases that could result in glaucoma, I was going to ask, what other diseases does glaucoma predispose a patient to?
Okay, I wouldn't say it results in glaucoma, but there's some form of coherence within them. Okay, let me start with some from the eye. There's any condition in the eye that results in elevated pressure can have glaucoma as a secondary effect. Now, we have a disease called uveitis. That's a whole lot of other definition on its own. But in the course of that, it's basically an inflammation of the uveal tract, which is a certain section in the eye. So once it raises the pressures of the eye, basically it now results in damage of the optic nerve. Let me just give you a little bit of a pictorial representation for the viewer to understand. Imagine you open a tap in a sink and the water drains. There's equilibrium and the water does not build, right? So if you clog the sink, if you close it and you turn on the tap, with time the water keeps building. And at some point it starts to overflow, right? And starts pouring. And imagine this water was being put in a balloon and you keep putting water at some point. At some point it bursts, right? Now, if the pressure in the eye keeps building, the eye cannot burst. So it finds a leeway to exert this pressure. And the nerve of the eye is one of those leeways that it usually affects. And this nerve now affects the brain. So it basically, not the brain, sorry, it affects the vision leading to the brain. So that's how it tends to affect your vision and eventually results in blindness. So basically, once there's elevated pressure in the eye, anything that causes elevated pressure, it finds that leeway, which is through the optic nerve, and then begins to progressively damage the optic nerve and can result in blindness. Now, glaucoma is an insidious condition, so it progressively causes damage, and most times people do not know that they have glaucoma. That's why glaucoma has been dubbed the nickname, the silent thief of sight. That's because it progressively destroys your vision and you do not realize. When you eventually realize that you have glaucoma, it's already too late. And any vision that you've lost due to glaucoma cannot be regained. And that's why it's the leading cause of irreversible blindness.
Okay, so what group of persons or who are more predisposed to having glaucoma?
Like I've said, blacks, adults, and people who already have a family history.
Okay.
Yes. So most times when we advise people to check their eyes, once you cross the age of 40, we advise you to have it more regularly. So if before you used to have your eyes checked once every 2 years, once you cross the age of 40, we can advise that you can start having your eyes checked every year. Now, the key in glaucoma is early detection. So once we notice you're already predisposed, we advise you have regular eye checks so that we can detect it early and start managing it early enough.
Okay, you did mention people who have a family history. Does it mean glaucoma is hereditary?
Yes, it is hereditary. Remember I said blacks are more predisposed, so it means it's a matter of gene. And as with everything in gene, you can transmit it to your children. So that's why, and studies over time have shown that once someone has glaucoma, a check has to be done on every other family members. And we've noticed that there's more, if I check someone whom there's no glaucoma in their family, it's harder to find. Maybe I may find, I may not find. But once you notice someone in a family has glaucoma, there's always a chance that you find someone else who has glaucoma, maybe in its early stages, maybe in its late stages. So in Africa, even though we have poor health records generally, and our older people, our older parents, grandparents especially, had poor health-seeking behavior. So we usually do not have those records. But if you go abroad, they may tell you, oh, my grandfather had glaucoma, my great-grandfather was probably diagnosed of glaucoma. But all we do remember here, sometimes we ask patients, well, has there ever been anyone that maybe suddenly lost their vision, maybe felt like he was blind? And so you hear someone say, okay, my grandfather, oh yeah, when I was little, I remember my grandfather could not see. And we asked them, did he have any accident that resulted in the blindness? If there's anybody that suddenly became blind, especially at old age, maybe, just maybe it could have been glaucoma, but we know they didn't check their eyes. So we now run this test for you. As an elderly person, you must not go blind. Your vision can reduce, agreed, but you must not go blind. So, but in Africa, we have that feeling that once you are old, you have to be blind. It's a sign of aging because your body is deteriorating. But you necessarily do not have to be blind.
According to statistics by Nigeria's Ministry of Health, over 0.78% of Nigerians are blind, and over 80% of this blindness is avoidable. Glaucoma is identified by Nigerian health professionals as more prevalent in the country, and lack of awareness as a factor that exposes people to the disease. This gathering is for people suffering from one eye problem or the other. They were invited for a free eye corrective surgery at the specialist hospital Gombe. And among these people, some may be victims of glaucoma, even though they may not be aware.
Idona baya ciwo amma dai sai kaikayi, amma ina zanne sai naga kamar hayaki anan, kamar ana turare wani abu, hayaki yana fita sai naga gudu dirim kamar hazo, amma idona baya sai kaikayi. Amma yanzu kina gani? Ina gani kadan ba.
Wato matsala na dai shine wannan ciwon idon nan da ya same ni, ba zato ba tamani a cikin kwana biyu ka idona ya rufe. To yanzu kuwa ba na gani ko kaɗan ma ba na gani. Shi ne na zo a nan in samu alfurma a taimaka mini, Allah ya taimaka buɗe mini idona.
Although glaucoma cannot be cured completely, medical experts say patients have some hope as they take medication. For effective eye care, people are advised to strictly adhere to health advisory by ophthalmologists.
Eyesight essentially refers to the physical attributes and performance of the many organic components involved in the visual system. We'll take a quick break now and we'll be back in a moment. you said that there is no exact cause for glaucoma. How then does one know if they have glaucoma? What are the symptoms of glaucoma?
The major type of glaucoma, which is the primary open angle glaucoma, is symptomless. So you do not know that you have glaucoma. It's when you are checked. Now, glaucoma, we don't say glaucoma has symptoms. We say it has signs. What's the difference between signs and symptoms? Symptoms are what you experience. Signs are what we detect clinically. So you do not experience anything. That's why we always advocate for regular eye checkups. Have your eyes checked regularly, because you wouldn't know, you wouldn't notice anything. At the point when you notice that you have glaucoma, it means a large degree of your vision has already been lost. So at that point, you have no choice but to notice it. You then notice that, oh, it seems like maybe I'm losing vision, or I have gone blind. There was a day we were on a radio station and we did just an exercise. I usually like doing it. I just tell everybody, raise your right hand or raise your left hand, close your right eye. Can you see? Drop your hand, raise your left hand. So we just randomly do it. And we found someone who came to the clinic one day, maybe not the day I had that show, but he said he was listening to the radio and he heard someone say that, and he realized one eye wasn't seeing. So sometimes for those kind of people, and he actually had glaucoma end stage, sometimes the progression on both eyes are not the same. So you may notice that one eye is really bad while the other one is really reduced. But what we usually tell people is have regular eye checkups. Once you have those regular eye checkups, it can be detected early enough. Then the second type of glaucoma, the primary angle closure glaucoma, that's the one that usually has some symptoms, but most times, like I said, that one causes less than 5% of the blindness resulting from glaucoma. That's because the symptoms sometimes are severe, come to severe pain, nausea, even vomiting, sometimes severe redness of the eye. And those kind of symptoms makes the patient rush to the eye clinic. And once they rush to the eye clinic, we check them, we treat them, and start managing the glaucoma. That's why that one causes less than 5% of the blindness, and it rarely even happens. But the other one, which is symptomless, it progressively takes away your vision without you realizing. And then you suddenly realize, I'm not seeing properly anymore. And at that point, it's already very late.
Okay, so speaking of regular eye checks, someone who comes to the clinic to get their eyes checked, how do you diagnose glaucoma?
Well, there are a series of tests we carry out in the eye clinic. First of all, we do a preliminary test. We ask questions, get your background history. We call it case history taking. Most times, that's when we tend to know if maybe someone in the family has glaucoma, for those who are well educated enough, or someone who had sudden blindness, which is usually not village people, but we tend to blame them a lot. Then after the case history, we do a vision check. We test your vision as at the moment you come to the eye clinic. We have some standard charts we use to check that. Then we do some other tests. Then we check your eye pressures. That is very necessary. If we notice your pressures are high, we also look inside the eye. There's some tests we do to look inside the eye to check that optic nerve and see if it's normal or if there's what we call the glaucomatous optic nerve. If we see those signs of a glaucomatous optic nerve, if we notice those signs, then we now refer you for some further tests, which are the central vision field analyzer. We have one called gonioscopy, and the most important one, the OCT, optical coherence tomography. Basically, that one is like a scan, let me use the word the CT scan, but for the eye, localized for the eye. So this checks the nerves, checks the retina, and tells us if there's any damage, and to some extent, the level or stage of the damage. So those are the basic preliminary tests. So most times, there are about 6 of them. So from those 6, we usually tick, we just make like a tick. So if 4 out of 5 tick, then likely you'll be diagnosed with glaucoma.
Okay, so what then is the management technique of glaucoma, management and treatment?
Right. Management of glaucoma is twofold. There's medical management and surgical management. But before we get to the management, we usually talk about preventive management. And it's not part of those two, but preventive. How do you prevent? Preventive management, basically, have regular eye checkups. The key to managing glaucoma is early detection. Once you've noticed to have glaucoma, especially in its early stages, we can start managing it. And in that way, we extend your sight span, if I can use that word. Because the end point of glaucoma is blindness. But the difference is that with management, we forestall that blindness or postpone the D-Day. So if, for example, you were meant to get blind with untreated glaucoma in 10 to 15 years, it being treated can extend the span to maybe 30 or 40 years. And then at least we know we've done our best. And if you eventually live so long and probably get blind at that, but at least you've been able to enjoy extra 20 to 30 years of your sight by managing your glaucoma. So we usually propose preventive, which is through regular eye checkups. Now, medical is basically managing glaucoma with drugs. Now, the only modifiable risk factor is the eye pressures. And that is what the drugs try to do, to bring the pressures of the eye to a minimal level that is good enough for the eye to prevent further damage of the nerve, the optic nerve, which is the nerve that connects the eye to the brain. Now, surgery is usually a last resort, and is usually aimed at also reducing the eye pressures. Now, we usually do that when the medical management isn't working so well. So if we are managing with drugs and we realize that you are still losing vision or your pressures are not still maintained within the normal limits, then we may now refer you for surgery. For most people who have surgery, we still continue managing them medically, because once we've brought down the pressures, then we may still place you on some drugs to still ensure that the pressures of your eyes are managed. So for some people, maybe before surgery, they are using multiple therapy drugs. But with surgery, they may be doing what we call monotherapy, maybe just a single drug to ensure that their eye pressures are stabilized.
Okay, so you said glaucoma is more common in people of the black race, and I think it's becoming prevalent, if I'm allowed to say that. What can be done to reduce this prevalence of glaucoma? Because keep hearing cases of glaucoma. Some persons are not even aware, like you earlier stated. Apart from regular and early detection, what else do you think can be done globally?
Okay, the three major things: one, awareness; two, education; and three, policies. Let me delve into each of them. Awareness basically has to be is about making people aware about their eyes, making them more conscious of the fact that their health is very important. They need to have their eyes checked. They need to ensure that they do not have this, no assumptions. Don't assume that I'm fine. Have your eyes checked. Let it be the doctor that tells you that your eyes are fine. So awareness, we do a lot of awareness campaigns. Generally, there are usually global dates, which in remembrance of eye care, we try to do maybe public awareness walks, awareness campaigns. Most recently, October 14th, we had the World Sight Day, where we did awareness campaign around the country, globally, everywhere in the world, where you find optometrists, eye doctors, doing a campaign educating the public about their eyes. So that's awareness campaign. Sometimes we even come to media, radio stations and all that. So the listeners or those who are tuned in know that, okay, this is a problem. It spurs some of them to actually have their eyes checked. So more people are aware. Then education, like what we're doing now, anybody who watches is being educated. Then for patients who come to the clinic, you equally educate them on some of these conditions. So we try to educate as many people as we come in contact with as eye doctors. Anybody you see, you try and educate them, let them know, let them be aware. In this age of social media. You tend to see articles online, you tend to read, just sometimes even create humor, comic relief, but ensure that the message is passed. So we try to educate the people on this kind of condition. Then the third, policy. Now, no matter the kind of campaign you do, if the policymakers are not in tune with you, you would never make any headway. So on some of these days, I forgot to add, we have a week in March. I think the second week in March. It's called Glaucoma Week. So it's a week globally used to educate people about glaucoma, inform them. Most times people even do free glaucoma checkups. Even in our hospital here, we tend to do free glaucoma checkups in that World Glaucoma Week. But we usually advise people, don't wait till it's glaucoma week for a free checkup, because you don't know the amount of vision that you may lose within the space of a year if you have glaucoma. But these are weeks that we try to encourage people by making it free, because a lot of us want it to be free. We want those free services. Then in terms of policymakers, we tend to speak to government officials, those in the corridors of power, to look at these conditions, this eye condition like glaucoma, make policies. It could be in terms of the drugs, maybe reducing import duty on the drugs to ensure that it's more affordable for the end user. All those little things, ensuring maybe making more hospitals, employing more eye doctors, more optometrists around the country. The people who usually are affected by this glaucoma in Nigeria are actually the poorer people. This is because they are less aware, they are less educated, and they have less access to medical services. So most times, we see a lot of primary health centers littered around the country. But the question is, how many optometrists are there? How many eye doctors are there? Sometimes, by the time you tell the person you have to travel from your local government area to the next to see an optometrist, then they are like, okay, either they don't have transport fare or it's too cumbersome for them. So they decide to manage their eye condition, and at the end of the day, they end up losing their vision. So these are part of the policies that we try to talk about. Employ more of these eye doctors in these primary health centers so that there is more access to the doctors from the patients in these rural areas, and ensuring that the eye care is not just accessible but also affordable through different means, either by reducing the cost of the drugs or even making our exchange rates easier so that the end user doesn't have to bear the burden.
Although there is no cure for glaucoma, regular eye checkups and early treatment can often stop the damage and protect your vision. As they say, your eyesight is one of your most important senses. By protecting your eyes, you will reduce the odds of blindness and vision loss, while also staying on top of any developing eye disease such as glaucoma. Thanks for joining us on today's edition of Healthy Living. I'm Aisha Salihu.